down and open top. But we were clever not to take it too far, though it's hard not getting tempted. Calling you up to see how you've been, 'cause don't I miss you and all those things we did back then. Way back then. It's funny how times roll by. Is it 12 years since last time? Where'd you go? What's the score? Did you find what you were looking for? I never see you anymore. I can't remember what we did that day. We were blowing off steam in Paris, but I wanted to stay, 'cause I know how it felt when we raised hell. I won't forget that. But we were clever not to take it too far, though it's hard not getting tempted. Calling you up to see how you've been, 'cause don't I miss you and all those things we did back then. Way back then. Killing time, Friday night, found a photograph of us. I can't remember what we did that time. We were spending one night in Venice. It just slipped my mind. I just know how it felt. I won't forget that. Windows down and open top. But we were clever not to take it too far, though it's hard not getting tempted. Calling you up to see how you've been, 'cause don't I miss you and all those things we did back then. Way back then. Way back then.
Do you ever feel you don't get out what you're putting in? All your hopes and efforts are all in vain. Who will pick you up when you've lost everything? Does it all become for granted with a wedding ring? Oh, there must be more. There must be another way. There must be conscious, different things in different ways. There must be love. There must be a reason, and a little bit of faith has
Hi everybody, Martin here. Thank you for joining me. I hope you're well. It's a beautiful evening here in Hampshire, and I'd like to welcome you all along to this repeat demonstration from Saturday. We've got about 23 minutes or something like that before the main demonstration kicks off. So do go grab yourself some tea, coffee, glass of wine, bottle of beer or whatever, and I've got a few bits to do as per usual. So with 82 people watching, I'm sure the chat and banter is going to be top notch as usual. So I'll get on with my bits and pieces. I've got to sort the cameras out and stuff like that. So whilst I'm doing that, please enjoy yourselves, and I'll see you shortly. So that needs to come down a bit. That'll do. And then bring over the other tripod, because I need two tripods for this camera tonight. So there's one there, and let's just turn that around a little bit. Slide that over there. Got to make sure that it doesn't touch the got to make sure that none of the tripods touch the lathe, otherwise it sends vibrations through them. So we'll put that one there. Good. Right, now I need to sort out the focus. So I'll sort out the focus of this one first. Right, configure video. Here we go. Camera control. Autofocus is on, so I can turn that off. That looks good. Brightness is okay. Color balance is not quite so good. Let's warm that up a bit, shall we? There we go. 5120. Okay, that's that camera done. And then we'll look at the overhead. Now I need to zoom this one in a little bit, and we'll warm that one up as well. 5120. I'll do. Zoom that one in. Oh, come on. Down to about there, I think. Oh, come on. Back out. Back. About there. And we'll sort the focus out on that one as well. So that should focus about there. Super duper. Awesome. Right, I think that will probably do for the levels and stuff like that. So I'm almost set up, and I'll be able to join in a little bit of chat and banter with 95 people watching now. Oh, just very quickly, Stuart Ingerwell, has anyone managed to find anywhere stocking the Pro Edge diamond belts? Stuart, that's a very, very good question, and I have actually been in touch with the Robert Sorby company and the UK sales manager, and he is on the case. So don't worry about that. If you do want the diamond belt, what I would suggest is contacting your preferred Robert Sorby supplier and asking them to get them in for you. Gary Jones, you tried the 55-degree fingernail. Fantastic. Right, okay. I do need to sharpen the gouge. I won't tell you too much about the demonstration tonight because I'm aware that some of you have already seen it and others of you who will be joining this evening haven't. So I'll hold off on the blurb about the demonstration till later. So I do need to sharpen the gouge. That'll do. Put that back over there. Did anybody notice in the overhead shot with the camera a second ago I haven't swept up from Saturday yet? Right, what have we got going on in the conversation? I've got a very poor stream coming back into the workshop this evening. It keeps dropping out. Dave Shorten, your Pro Edge arrives tomorrow. That's fantastic. Alberta in Canada. Cool. Graham Taylor, how do you set it for 55 degrees when the gouge, at least mine, does not have that as a setting? Graham Taylor, what I would suggest you do is re-watch the Pro Edge demonstration I did last week. Hopefully you've still got the link for it. I can make the video public again so you can have a look, or drop me an email via my website and I'll explain it to you. So we've got, I'm seeing Canada, South Africa. Wow. "15 minutes until we get started." I'll sort all that out in a minute. Martin Southwell, trying to contact you. You've got a lot of oak. Would you like some? Anthony, can you drop me a line via my website, please, at msabumsmith.com. That'll be the easiest way, or you can contact me via my Facebook page. I'll be very happy to have a chat with you about that. Thank you very much. Colin Watson, you've just started watching the triptych video. Yeah, that was a real marathon project to do, that triptych video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope anybody else who's tuning in this evening enjoyed the triptych. I still don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video that went live this morning. Mark Dennehy. Hi, Mark. You made it to this one. Well done. Okay, yeah, as Phil Bolter said, yeah, give a shout out to your locations, everybody. Your county and your country, or county if you're in the UK, and state, territory, county, or whatever in elsewhere. Brandon Gamwriter, have you done an intrinsic colour that is predominantly green? I've been struggling and love your work. I haven't got one here, Brandon. I do have a couple, but they're not in my immediate vicinity, I don't think. Hang on, I'll go and have a look. That's purple. I think, Brandon, they might be buried in a box. Let me try over here. No, I haven't got one here, Brandon. I'm afraid. Sorry, I don't have one here. No, I don't have one here. I'll have to do one for you. Right, let's just have a little scroll back down through here. Oh, Brandon, you're in Seattle. I've been to Seattle. 22 years ago, I was in Seattle. Had an absolutely brilliant time. Loved it. It's a fantastic city, Seattle. East Yorkshire, that's a top-notch place as well. Lambourne in Berkshire's pretty good. Cuba Holy in Kent. Step Aside in Dublin, Ireland. I've been to Dublin, and where else have I been? Oh, Limerick. Had a thoroughly good time there. Huddersfield, Highlands, Scotland. Silk in Basingstoke. Hello again. I don't think you've missed a single demonstration, have you, Silk? Brighouse, Black Country. Hi, Stephen. Dave Short and Chris Cox. Hi, Chris. Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. I've got your second email. Thank you very much. I will look at that as I think I've nailed what the problem could be. Ontario. Norway. Hi, Ronnie in Norway. Keith Calloway. Romsey. I used to work in Romsey, Keith. On Latimer Street. I used to work there when I first got into photography many years ago. Derwent Wood Turning Club. Hi, Alan. Ashford. Izzy Byers in Cambridge. 116 people. Wowee. Brandon, I would love to come back to Seattle. It's a really cool place. Yeah, really loved it over there. Stephen Allnut in Basingstoke. Yay! I was born in Basingstoke. Walsall in the West Midlands. Flaming Turner. This particular branch of my family hail from Walsall. Slovakia. Wow, I don't think I've had anybody from Slovakia yet. So that's cool. Hi, Gugugs. Aaron Wilson, Mooresville, Indiana. All your American place names sound really cool. Perhaps that's because we're not familiar with them. Gary Letizier in Guernsey. Hi, Gary. Bicester in Oxfordshire. Hey, cool. Bet you've never been to Swadlincote, said Alan Smith. I don't think I have, Alan. No, I don't think I have been to Swadlincote. Not even sure where it is, to be honest. Okay, right, we've got 9 minutes before we get going with the demonstration. There's 121 people here, so that's really cool. But I have coffee and water. I was really dehydrated after Saturdays when my water tasted like soap. It was quite horrible. Holyhead. Holyhead's Wales. I haven't been to Holyhead. Now that would be the ferry for Holyhead to Dunleary. Now when I went to Dublin, I was crewing on a holiday. I was crewing a tall ship from the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic back up to Greenock in Scotland, and we pulled into Dublin, as it were, on the way up there. And at least apparently I went to Dublin. I don't remember much about it really. I remember being in a pub somewhere, but that's about it. Anthony Southwell, thank you very much. You're an absolute star. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Anthony. Swaddling Coat in Derbyshire. No, I haven't been there, sorry. Thin Ice Baseman. Hi, Thin Ice Baseman in sunny Norfolk. Steve Ash, I've not been to Chesterfield either. Maybe one day. Maybe if there's a club up there one day, I'll get to Chesterfield. Oh, Anthony, if you sent me an email when you sent me that piece of Belinga, I'm not 100% certain I've still got it. I've got 600 emails I need to reply to at the moment, because my emails have just gone absolutely bonkers. So if you could send it again for me, Anthony, that would be great. Sorry, I'm very, very behind on emails and stuff. Would you be willing to do a demo for a turning guild here in North Carolina? Yes, absolutely I would, Jim. In fact, I am putting together an online booking form for remote demonstrations like the one I'm going to be doing this evening for you. So absolutely I'm interested in doing that for you, Jim. It will be an absolute pleasure too. If you could drop me a line again, if you contact me through the contact form on my website, I'll be very happy to have a chat with you before we go ahead and make a booking about the kind of things that I can do for you in a remote demonstration. I'm not scared of a late night. Oh, Anthony, yes, I've got the Belinga. Yeah, it's over there. I've got that, but I haven't received an email about any oak. You were talking about oak, I think. Florida. Killing my time in Florida. That sounds like a nice idea, killing some time in Florida, doesn't it? Oh. Excuse me a minute. Well, I've got a bit of an iffy connection just at the minute. The connection seems to be dropping a bit, so please do hold on for a mo. I'm doing what I can to sort it out. I've got my internet guy hopefully looking at it at the moment. Bear with me a minute. I just need to check a couple of bits. I can't do much about it other than tell my internet guy what's going on, but I will do my best to get any yeah, connection's a tiny little bit unstable as far as I can see, but might be able to get it smoothed out a little bit. Hopefully it won't be, hopefully it'll sort itself out in a minute. and I can't really cancel the connection and start again, which is going to be a real pain. But hopefully it will even itself out. Right, I'll just put you all on hold just for a couple of minutes while I see if I can make a phone call to get this sorted out, and then when I get back we'll be able to start the demonstration. So please don't go away, I'll be back shortly.
I'm not heading for the stars, driving down the boulevard at night, playing Coldplay on repeat, watching people on the street as I go by. And it doesn't even matter to me where I go, I just feel I need to take a ride. Got my coffee cup to go, and I'm gonna hit the road tonight. Now my wheels in motion and my windows open with the wind blowing in my hair. I'm driving down the highway, gonna do this my way. I can feel it in the air.
Right, I'm back again. The internet connection should be back up to speed in a few minutes, so if it's alright with you, we'll just hold off just for a little bit before, just while the connection just sorts itself out. The guy who looks after the internet is just at the end of the phone, so he's just having a quick look at it for me. And I don't really want to start thank you very much indeed, Jim. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yes, it'll should be just a few minutes before the internet connection sorts itself out. So I will hold on for as long as I can until I see the internet connection come true, and then we'll start the demonstration. So I will just dive in and I will write that on the what's it. Come on. So I will just dive in and I will... Okay. Oh, looks like it has just come. Looks like it has just come back. So we'll give it a couple more minutes, just to make sure that it is properly settled down, and then we'll get started. So take this opportunity. We'll say 2 or 3 minutes just to go and grab a cup of coffee, cup of tea, bottle of wine, bottle of beer, whatever, and then we will get started with the demonstration itself. Hi, Clive. Right, so yes, I'll be back shortly.
I'm not heading for the stars. the street as I go by. And it doesn't even matter to me where I go. I just feel I need to take a ride. Got my coffee cup to go, and I'm gonna hit the road tonight. Now my wheels in motion and my windows open with the wind blowing in my hair. I'm driving down the highway, gonna do this my way. I can feel it in the air. Here I go. Turning up the stereo in a place I didn't know.
Right, back again. Really sorry about that little interruption there, just as the connection started to get a little bit wonky, but we're back. I've got a green light on the laptop, which means we're good to go. Everything is holding nice and steady, and hopefully you guys will also have a suitably smooth stream. So welcome, big warm welcome to everybody for joining me for the demonstration this evening. It's great to see so many people from all over the world tuning in again to watch this beginners bowl demonstration. I hope you are all well and coping with any isolation that you are in at the moment, and getting out to your workshops too if you have a little bit more time on your hands. A little bit of housekeeping just before we get started. The first thing, probably the most important thing, is if you have any questions, please do hold on to them until I ask specifically for questions. As I run these demonstrations by myself, I can't read what's happening on the comments, even though I can see them just here. I can't see them when I'm actually sort of in the middle of the presentation, so please do hold off until I ask for questions specifically. I think there is it's about a 15-second delay, I think, between me going out and me seeing myself again on the little screen just here. Let me just show you that quickly. See, I can see what's going on with the stream there, and there is what I can see. So you can probably work out the delay from that yourselves, actually. But anyway, it's about 15 to 20 seconds, something like that. So please do hold off on your questions. I can see if the stream is getting a little bit wonky, so you don't need to comment about a wonky connection or anything like that. I can see what's going on, but there's really very little I can do about it. And secondly, sit back and enjoy, and I hope you find this demonstration entertaining, informational, that's not a word, informative, that's the right word, and just generally enjoyable. Anthony Southwell, thank you very much. You are an absolute star. Thank you. Right, let's get going. This evening's demonstration is a very simple, elegant bowl, and I'm going to go through a technique with you that is suitable for beginners, and also any of you who are a little bit more experienced that might have a couple of problems with your technique and tool presentation. I hope I'll be able to address those for you this evening too. As this is a repeat of Saturday's demonstration, I can show you the bowl that we turned on Saturday, which is this one. It's cherry, and I have a cherry blank here too. And you can see here that we've got a really nice elegant line to it. It's a relatively thick wall, but I will go into why there's a relatively thick wall there as we go through this evening. And also, to be fair to beginners, all of the beginners who may be watching this evening, I am going to be using a standard set of tools, just the standard set of 6 tools that you might get from any number of manufacturers and distributors, well, anywhere in the world really. We're not going to go through what the entire box is, we're just going to concentrate on the 3 tools that we're going to use, which are a bowl gouge, a diamond tip parting tool, and a skew chisel. Okay, but we'll come on to all of those as we go through it. But to start with, we need to have a think about the timber that we're going to use. My personal belief is when you're learning, you should really, in an ideal scenario, be learning on the wood that you want to be turning, so a hardwood. Pine, although it is as cheap as chips, cuts really nicely, but you need incredibly sharp tools to get a decent cut with it, and in my opinion it doesn't really give you a true feeling of what turning hardwood is all about. So you're better off looking at some of the softer hardwoods that are out there, like cherry, for example. Fruitwoods are generally on the softer side of being hard. I generally teach here in the workshop on cherry, air-dried beech and sycamore. They are the ones that I generally teach with here in the workshop, because they are slightly soft, they cut really nicely, and they are also fairly forgiving too. And I wouldn't recommend learning or cutting your teeth, as it were, on species like ash or oak. Although they may be plentiful, if they're kiln dried, they are rock hard and will be very difficult to turn and to practice your tool techniques and stuff like that. So I would be very cautious and concentrate on trying to find the softer hardwoods, fruitwoods, sycamore, air-dried beech, that kind of thing, and I think they will give you a much better, truer representation and better help almost of what wood turning is really all about. So we've got tonight a piece of cherry. This is a prepared blank of cherry, so it's got its wax coating round the outside, and it measures 8 by 2 inches, which is, well, call it 210 by 55 millimeters. Now the other thing I'm going to show you this evening is the use of a faceplate, and if I just come over here, I'm going to show you the use of a faceplate. There we are, you can see the faceplates on your screen there. So we'll be turning a bowl off a faceplate rather than a worm screw. I used to use worm screws like this one a lot, but certainly the last 2 or 3 years, my taste has changed from going with worm screws to faceplates like these. Now if you look at these, I'll show you the real ones. This is this one here is a spindle mounted faceplate, which mounts directly onto the spindle in your headstock, and they generally come as standard with your lathe. My lathe is really quite big, so it comes with a really big faceplate, but if you've got a smaller lathe, you will probably have a smaller faceplate like similar to this one. But my personal preference for turning at the moment is a chuck mounted faceplate, like the other 3 that you can see on your screen there. Really big one, medium sized one, and a small one. And the benefit of using a chuck mounted faceplate like these is no, come on, that one, there we go, is they fit directly onto your chuck jaws, so you can leave your chuck mounted to the spindle throughout the entire process, and you don't have to worry about chopping and changing it. It's just a little bit of a it's not a shortcut, it's just an easier way to do things really. But you can do this technique with a worm screw or a spindle mounted faceplate. It's entirely up to you, so just take the information from this demonstration and apply it to either a worm screw or a faceplate. Just need to move the tool rest out of the way. Now we need to have, because we're mounting on a faceplate, we need to have a look at what it actually looks like when the wood is attached to the faceplate. So you can see on the screen there we've got a diagram. Ow, that's sharp. You can see that we've got a diagram there that shows the, whoops, knocking everything over. We've got the chuck jaws, Then we've got the faceplate that are mounted on the jaws, the wood screws that are going into the wood through the faceplate, and then of course we've got the blank. There we go, I'll get used to this. It's still a fairly new diagram, this one. So we've got the blank that is attached to the faceplate, which in turn is attached to the chuck. But we need to get this centered as much as possible. Not every blank that you buy from your hardware store or your wood turning shop is going to be completely round. So we need to find a way that we can quickly and easily find the center, or the rough center of the blank. So for that, I'm going to use a center finder, like this one. Can you tell I'm not quite used to these diagrams yet, like this one here. The center finder is a very, very inexpensive tool. There it is. It has two fences on it, essentially. Let's just look over the top. Move that a little bit as well. So it's got two fences. I think you might be able to see that. We've got one here at 45 degrees on one side, and then if we flip it over, we've got one here at 90 degrees. And then running up the center, we have a straight line, and it's this line that we need to draw on, or draw with. I hope everybody's following this. It should be okay. So there's the blank that we've got. There's no markings on it to tell me where the center is. So with the 90-degree fence pointing onto the blank, press the flat side against the blank. Let's just move that over there a little bit. That camera's not in an ideal position, but never mind. Slide that 90-degree fence up against the blank like that, and then draw a line along there. Whoops. Draw a line along the straight edge there. Turn the blank, do it again. Turn the blank, do it again. Now some people only do 4. I generally do, well, 5 or 6 really, just to get a slightly better idea on where the center is. And then if I just hold this up here for you, you might be able to see there that those lines don't quite reach the center, but it does give you a really clear idea on where the center of the blank is. And then with your faceplate, if you're using a spindle mounted faceplate, there it is. This one is obviously clearly far too large. You can just look down the center of the faceplate there and line up your rough center, and then you will be at the best guess, as it were, or the nearest you can possibly be to the center to save as much wood as possible. But we're not doing that one. We're going to be using a little one like this. Now, obviously, or I should hope it's obvious, the smaller the faceplate, like this one here, the smaller the pieces you can actually turn. I would not suggest using a small faceplate like this for anything over 12 inches across, and one like this, this one here, this one's slightly bigger, you could probably get up to about 14 inches with something like that safely, maybe 16 at a push, but I would be very cautious with 16 inches. And then this one here, this is a huge one, and this one is for a big set of jaws, and you can turn monstrously sized pieces off a faceplate like this. Now each faceplate itself it doesn't come with a set of jaws, but they are designed for specific sizes of jaws. So when you are choosing a faceplate, a chuck mounted faceplate, make sure that you've got the correct set of jaws that matches the faceplate that you are using. So back to the blank, and I've just eyeballed that up in the center, or as close to the center as I can get it. And then I'm using some sensible screws. Oops, that's unscrewing it. So I'm just using some sensible screws just to attach the faceplate. These are 30mm screws, so about 1.25 inches in a 2-inch blank. is fine. Chuck key, and there's the blank mounted, and you can see inside the faceplate there's a little dovetail recess that sits over the jaws. That sits over the jaws, and then you can expand the jaws into that dovetail recess, and your piece will be held nice and securely. I hope everybody followed that. I'll stop here for some questions, so if anybody has any questions regarding the mounting, now's the time to ask. JP Woodwork, hello mate, how are you? Adrian Moore, wood screws are the ones you want to be using. I use these Super Drive wood screws from my local builders merchant. I've been using those ever since I started turning, and I've found them to be absolutely superb. Queensland, Australia, hello Infinity Wood Oz. 202, right, anybody got any questions on that, on the mounting method? 65-inch TV. Mark Dennehy will be. Yes, I'll be talking about Spalted Beech in a bit, Mark. Is there an ideal size for the faceplate? That's a good question, David Steele. Let me show you something. I'll show you this graphic again a bit later. Right, if you have a look at this graphic here, you'll have to imagine that there's a faceplate on the top, and where the screws go in, you don't want them so long that when you cut the shape of the bowl you can't turn the screws out. So I would suggest screws that go in about halfway down through the blank would be a sensible length, depending upon obviously how deep you want the bowl to be. But obviously if you've got a tiny amount of screw sticking out the bottom, then that's not going to be sufficient. So make sure the screw has got a decent purchase on the bottom. Let me show you on a different faceplate. This faceplate is identical to the one that I've just put in there, and if I put the screw through it, let's just turn that off. If I put the screw through it, you can see there that I've got the majority of the screw sticking out. Let me show you on the overhead camera actually. You can see I've got the majority of the screw sticking out. If you're using piddly little screws where you've only got a little bit sticking out, that is going to be not a good idea. So make sure you've got, that's coming roughly halfway down the blank there. I think you can see that. That is a good length of screw to use. On mounting, what size blank is the upper limit for what size faceplate? Mark, I've just mentioned that on the size of the faceplate I'm using at the moment, I wouldn't go any wider than 12 inches. The next one up, oops, which is that one. Hang on, let's bring that back up. Where did it go? It's not that one. There it is. Right. If we look at this one here, the spindle mounted faceplate, that's pretty big. It's got loads of holes in it. I think it's got about 10 screw holes in it, and it's about that wide. You could do easily probably 16 to 20 inches on that one. The same with this one here. That one there, about 14 to 16 inches, and that one there probably no more than 12, I would say, just to be on the safe side. But You may actually find when you buy one of the faceplates online, it will actually give you a guide on the maximum sizes that you can turn with it. Paul Smith, hi Paul. 10 to 5 in the morning in Australia, wow. Okay, right, let's have a look next at the tools we're going to use, and the main tool I'm going to be talking about this evening is the bowl gouge. Online I do occasionally see people using a spindle roughing gouge to turn a bowl. Massive piece of advice here: don't. The clue is in the name. This is a spindle roughing gouge and is used for turning spindles. Do not use a spindle roughing gouge on a bowl. It can be incredibly dangerous. Okay, I'm not going to go into the reasons why this evening. If you do some research online, you'll be able to find the reasons why you shouldn't be using a spindle roughing gouge on a bowl. But as I said, the clue is in the name: a spindle roughing gouge and a bowl gouge. So let's just take a look at the anatomy of a bowl gouge. Pop, there we go. Here we are. Right. Bowl gouge is an incredibly flexible and versatile tool. I use these particular gouges, these are 3/8 gouges, for spindle turning as well as bowl turning. And if we just take a look at the diagram there, running up, well, if we start on the right hand side, so just here we've got the shank, which is the main length and the main body of the tool. The shank ends at the heel, and then from the heel, where we come round to the bevel, where the bevel runs, that is essentially our cutting edge and the edge that becomes in contact with the wood. And then where the bevel comes round the top over the toe, if we just look about there, we've got the toe. The wings come round. The wings come round there, which form the cutting edge, and then right here, where the wings meet the top of the flute, that's the shoulder. Okay, now some people don't mention the toe. I call this a toe right at the top of the cutting edge here, and then the bottom of that at the bevel is generally called the heel, so heel to toe. So we'll just have a look at that. We are using a 55-degree bevel on here this evening. The standard grind for a gouge is 45 degrees, but I personally find a 55-degree bevel gives me a little bit more flexibility onto the depth of the bowls that I can turn, rather than having to have a 45-degree gouge and a 55-degree gouge. So I hope that all makes sense. I will be talking about each one of these parts of the gouge as we go through the demonstration, so it's good that I can actually clear up these bits with you now. Okay, if we just come back now and we can start thinking about turning the bowl, the first thing we need to do is actually get the bowl or the piece round. Where's that gone? There it is, left over from Saturday. Okay. Right, so what we have at the moment, let me just show you this. This is how our, oops, yeah, there we go. This is how our bowl looks. That's actually in slightly the wrong position, but never mind, I can't do anything about that at the moment. But you can see, hang on a minute, let's see if we've got a different, no. Okay, I'll have to rearrange that another time. Right, so you can see down the bottom of the screen, there they are. You can just see the screws there. This is roughly in the same orientation as I've got here, and I'm going to show you a couple of methods of roughing your bowl down to round. And I'm going to bring the tailstock up as well. You can just see that coming into shot. I'm going to bring the tailstock up for a little bit of support, just in case anything untoward should happen. I can't get that square. There we go, that'll do. Raise that up a little bit. There, that'll do. So you've roughly got the same view that I have now. And if I move the other camera round to the other tripod, on that camera you'll have an idea of what I'm doing here too. So the first thing we've got to think about is getting it round and balanced. If you look at the diagram, here, you can see that the bevel is travelling parallel to the edge of the blank just here. Look, you can see that arrow pointing that way. So when you're beginning to rough down your blank and get it round, if you make sure that you've got the bevel running the same direction as the edge of the blank, you will get a really nice fine cut. Is this making sense? Should do. So after we've got it mounted, give the piece a little spin just to make sure that the piece isn't going to catch on the tool rest as it comes round. And the tool rest should be at a height that when the tool is presented to the work, the wood is coming down onto the cutting edge on the center line. Okay, and you can see here that I've got the handle pointed down. Let me just put my glasses on. Now, just very quickly before we go on any further, that one. Make sure you are wearing some kind of face protection. There's a face shield there. I'm wearing a pair of glasses. Wearing a pair of glasses this evening, but make sure that when you do start turning, you are wearing suitable PPE. I'll just bring that diagram back up again, because there are two cuts I'm going to show you for roughing down a bowl. The first one is a pull cut like this one, which is where, just change the camera angle, which is where we're going to pull the gouge through the piece, as you can see there on the diagram. You can do this from either side of the blank. You can either do it from the headstock side, or you can do it from the tailstock side. It doesn't matter which way round you do it. I prefer to do it from the tailstock side because it keeps me away from the spinny bits and the dangerous metally bits over here. But for this first cut, I'm going to show you from this side so you can see what's going on from the other camera here. Start with the lathe slowly. I'm just going to double check that the blank's not hitting the tool rest on the way round, and the blank is as close, or the tool rest is about 5 millimeters away from the blank there, so I can't get any fingers in there or anything like that. Now I'm going to start the lathe nice and slowly. I think you can see there that it's not entirely round, so the first few cuts are going to be a little bit bumpy. The lathe at the minute is at 472 RPM if anybody's interested, and I'm going to start with the handle down. The majority of the things I'm going to show you this evening start or use the handle in a downward orientation like this, and as you can see, it's actually resting on my thigh here. My right foot is opposite the tool rest. My left hand is going to sit over the top of the over the top of the gouge. Let's just get that to the right height. And the left hand is just going to act as a little bit of a support to stop the gouge bouncing up and down. And then all I'm going to do is move my body weight from this position to that position. Let's show you that over the top. From here to here. My whole body is moving. And if I show you back here again, I'll show you sideways on. I'm actually moving from here to here. That's all I'm doing. My whole body is moving. It's almost like I've become the tool, as it were, and the actual gouge itself is an attachment. So from here to here, that's all my body's doing. I'm keeping the gouge nice and close to me, and I've got control throughout the entire cut. If my hands are away from my body, or if the handle is too far away, I can easily lose control. But by keeping it nice and close with essentially 3 points of contact, 1, 2, 3 down here, I've got a really nice, sturdy, stable grip on the tool. It's not tight because the wood is going to be doing the work, and all I need to do is move the tool through the wood. So I'm going to line the cut up and just move my body through the cut. Now the gouge is bouncing a little bit. That's because the blank isn't round. So I'm just letting the wood come down onto the tool, and because of the angle that the cutting edge is at here, the wood is actually being sliced rather than chopped, which is why I'm getting these nice shavings coming off. And I'm not putting much pressure in through the tool at all. There's very little pressure going in. I'm just letting the wood come down onto the edge, and I am just guiding the tool through the cut. Now let me show you that from the opposite direction. Let me just put that diagram back up as well. So this is what we're doing. Oops, pay attention, Martin. So this is what we're doing. I've got my right hand over the tool now, and I'm just going to move my body backwards. And you can see the more round, or the rounder the piece becomes, the finer the shavings are as they come off. Now that little catch I got there was because I was waving the tool around and looking at the screen. So that there's a little lesson there. But because the lathe isn't spinning round at thousands and thousands and thousands of miles per hour, it wasn't very scary. Now if we look at a slightly different cut, so you can see there that the flute is in towards, is turned towards the lathe. If we then turn the gouge around, so the toe is pointing that way, and if we keep the bevel in that same orientation, look, you can see that the angle that my gouge is here is exactly the same as the angle of the gouge in the diagram. Let's just move that handle a little bit. So this is a push cut, and I'm going to speed the lathe up a tiny little bit, and by keeping the gouge or the bevel pointed in the direction that I want to go, I can get a really fine, super fine cut. And ease it out the end. And you might be able to see there just how fine that cut is across that side of the blank. A little bit of tear out on the end grain, which is quite normal. So you can see as the gouge was going through the wood, let me see if I can show you, the bevel was running parallel to the direction that I want to travel. Hope that all makes sense. Mike Waltz here. Hello, Mike. Okay, right. I'll just show you that cut one more time. I'm going to move the tool rest in a little bit because the blank is a tiny little bit smaller than it was a few minutes ago. So we'll start that again. The lathe's running really quite slowly. It's at 522 RPM, and if we just look, actually let me show you this from the other direction with the other camera. There we are. We can do this cut from both directions, but you'll be able to see hopefully with the other camera. And then just ease it out the end. If you drop off the end like that, then you're putting too much pressure into the wood, too much pressure this way rather than along the tool rest. And it really, really, really doesn't need an awful lot of pressure to make these sorts of cuts. Right, you turn that off. I'll stop there again for any questions. Just move that cable. Does anybody have any questions at all? Let me just move this camera back. I'll just stop there for any questions. Harvey Klein in California, hiya. I don't see any questions coming in. Leisure at cut, sand, wax and admire. Yes, I will be very happy to pass that on to my son for you. David Steele, your pull cuts tear the grain. What am I doing wrong? Probably, David, you need to just double check your gouges really nice and sharp. Drop the handle and make sure, let's just pull that diagram back up. Hopefully you can see my finger, and make sure that the wood is being sliced along the shoulder here. That would be the two main things I would suggest you do for that one. Oh, Emma the Tiny Turner's here. Hi, Emma. Ivor Longwalk. Okay, shouldn't really be answering product questions about that this evening, but used within 6 months. I've got to put some kind of shelf life on it legally, Ivor Longwalk, and so 6 months is a sensible one. But if it's about 1.5 years old and it's not too gloopy, then you'll be absolutely fine with it. Christopher Dommermuth, my preference for rounding off a bowl is the push cut that I just demonstrated second there. It is a slightly more difficult cut because, let me just switch over to the other camera. So if you see the if you can see the orientation of the gouge here, as you're pushing it through, if you don't keep it in that orientation, you can actually push that. You can actually push the toe in, so this cut isn't square, which isn't too much of a problem really, but you can end up pushing the toe into the work, so this cut here isn't particularly square. So it needs the push cut needs a little bit of practice, whereas this one here, where you're pulling the gouge through, it's a much easier cut to keep control of. Chris Cox, how do you sort out the tear out on the end grain? Chris, that'll be an easier question to answer when we start shaping the bowl, which we'll be doing in a minute. Paul Canby, does the type of wood determine the cut you use? No, not really. You will find that a push cut works better on punky wood though. Particularly something like spalted beech, you'll get a better result using a push cut than a pull cut. David Hobbs, do you recommend a different size gouge for different size bowl, or do you stick to the 3/8 for everything? The majority of stuff I do, David, is with a 3/8 bowl gouge, and this is a UK 3/8 bowl gouge. I'm not sure what they call it in the States, but essentially it's a standard size bowl gouge. That's a 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and if I'm doing something particularly big or particularly gnarly, I will do the majority of the cutting with a 1/2 inch gouge and then refine those cuts to get a final sort of surface with the 3/8 gouge. Emma the Tiny Turner's here. Emma, if you've got some more lives coming up, do drop the information in the comments there for people to see, so they can tune in and see you too. All right, last question for this one. What is the moisture content of the blank? Will you turn it to the finished thickness? Very good question there, Dolores Steele. Thank you. I'd like to turn at around 14% moisture, or between 12 and 14. I find it cuts really nicely, it accepts colours really well, and it's also 14% is the upper limit really for wax finishing, or any finishing really. So 14% is an upper limit, somewhere around 12% generally, as much as possible. Adrian, this isn't really the place to be asking product questions. If you've got any questions about the products or anything like that, drop me a line through one of the websites, and I'll be happy to sort you out. Cheerio, Emma. Graham Middow, do you mainly use production wood or like a chunk of seasoned local timber? Graham, I've got local timber stacked around all over the place, but I don't have a huge amount of time to process it, frankly. I've got boards and stuff that are stacked up under tarpaulins outside, but I don't have time to process it all properly. I've got to do a little bit at a time, and most of the time I just use purchased blanks from one of my favourite suppliers, really. Right, okay, let's have a look at doing the bottom of the bowl. If we just take a quick look, which picture? Which picture? Oh, I've lost it. Oh, let's look at this one. Right. No, I can't. No, it's not that one. Wrong one. That's annoying. I haven't actually got a picture for what I want. I'll have to sort that out. Right. If we take a look at the blank that we've got on the lathe at the minute with the overhead camera, or that one. So we've got the blank mounted. It's actually this way. So the screws in the faceplate are going into the inside of the bowl here. So the bowl is actually mounted essentially back to front. So this is going to be the outside of the bowl, which means we've got to put something on the bottom that's going to enable us to reverse mount it onto the chuck when we have turned the outside. That should make sense. And there are a couple of ways we can do that. We can either use a tenon. Which looks like that, or we can use a recess that looks like that. I'll just briefly go into the descriptions of each one. Most beginners will use this method here, the recess, which means there's an hole in the bottom of your your finished piece like this. These are okay, these are great for beginners. You've got to be careful when doing it, and I will be explaining that as we go through putting the recess in. So most beginners will use a recess like this, because once you have turned the bottom, reverse mounted it and done the inside, the bowl is essentially finished. But if you turn a tenon like on this bowl here and on this diagram here, when you finish the bowl you need to turn the tenon off. There are certain methods and certain styles of bowl that mean you don't have to turn the tenon off, but that's not what we're doing this evening. So you need to turn this tenon off, and that generally requires the use of a set of extra jaws like those there, or they are coal jaws, or a Longworth chuck, or a jam chuck method, which to my mind is not particularly suitable to turning your first bowl. So we're going to look at turning a recess, which is a little hole in the bottom of the bowl here that is mounted in exactly the same way as the faceplate. So we need to make a little hole with a dovetail in it on the bottom of your bowl in order to reverse mount it to enable you to turn the inside. So let's lose that and then change the camera back again to this one here. Right, so the bowl is round now, but we've still got an untidy face on what will be the bottom and the outside of the bowl, but we do have a rather handy centre mark here left from the live centre. So bear in mind, everything that we're doing at the moment is prep work, is just prepping for the actual sort of the main turning. And what I want to do now is I want to get this face here nice and smooth and flat, so we can put our recess in the bottom, or if we were turning a tenon we can put a tenon on the bottom, but we will use a recess. And this centre mark here is really handy at this point, because I can make sure that I'm cutting directly on the centre line to clean off the face. And we'll again, if you can see on the screen there, the handle again is down and the tool rest is at a height that when the tool is presented it's right on the centre line. And the flute, remember the bit with the hole in here, if vertical is 0 degrees, you rotate it over about 45 degrees, and then that will give you a nice presentation to take this cut. Again, I'm going to make this cut with the lathe running slowly. There is no need at all to turn any part of a bowl at 1,000 miles an hour, or in fact anything over 1,000 RPM. With decent tool presentation and a little bit of practice, it is safer and somewhat more satisfying to turn a bowl slowly than it is to turn a bowl fast. But we'll look at that in a little bit more detail when we get going a little bit more properly. Right, so the handle down, and again it is slightly into my hip. If you look at the top left corner of your screen, you'll be able to see that this is actually in my hip, and I'm cutting on the centre line. Start the lathe, and then I'm just going to present the tool to the work just carefully, and then I'm going to move my body weight backwards, let the wood do the work, and all my left hand again is doing, just move that tripod out of the way, all my left hand is doing is acting as a guide for this, and I'm just moving my body backwards. So that if you watch, the tool is not changing its presentation at all. The handle isn't coming up and down, it's not moving in and out. Once I've established the cut, which is here, the gouge and everything remain in exactly the same orientation as I move that across the face of the work. I'm going to speed the lathe up a tiny little bit So that has now come up to 600 RPM, give or take a little bit. And a really nice bit of practice is to, you see we've got these little spiral marks here. A really nice method of practice is to present the tool to the work and then see how slowly you can draw the tool along the face to make those spiral marks as close together as you possibly can, with the lathe running slowly. So we'll just do another one of those, nice and slowly, nice and steady. And you can see there that from start to finish the tool remained in exactly the same position, and the wood was coming down onto the wood, onto the gouge, and I'm not pushing into it. Once I've established the cut in the centre, the gouge remains exactly where I put it throughout the cut. And just to give you an idea on how little the left hand actually does, you can make this cut with one finger. Don't try that at home, that's just for illustrative purposes. So there we go, that's the bottom of our bowl. Remember, we're still doing prep work, but now what we need to do is we've got to work out the size of the recess to fit our jaws. Now, depending upon the size of jaws you have, your measurement may well be different to the measurement that I'm going to put on here. So make sure that the jaws you're using, you know the size of the recess or the tenon that you need to be putting onto your piece to accurately and properly fit the jaws that you're using. Let's just have a little mouthful of water because I've run out of coffee. Okay, now I know that the jaws I'm using are sort of a standard 2-inch set of jaws. They're Nova jaws, and I'm going to use, rather than measuring out from the centre 30 millimeters with a ruler, what I'm going to do, and this is a shameless plug for a product invented by Chris Fisher, the blind wood turner, and this has just been released at Axminster, and it's Chris Fisher's the blind wood turner's speed sizer. And this, I think, is a really cool invention, and it takes a lot of the measuring work out of marking the bottom of your blanks. So over here on this side we've got all of the measurements for tenons, and these are all marked out for Axminster's own jaws. So all of this side over here is for tenons, and all of this side over here is for recesses. But down the middle here, marked in 10 millimeter intervals, we've got jaws that we've got measurements that we can use for third-party jaws, like the jaws that I'm using here. And you can just pull your live sensor into position just to hold it there. And as I said, I need a 60 millimeter recess, so I've marked that on there. So just stick a pencil, whoops, I've done it up too tight, don't do it up too tight. So you can just stick a pencil in there, rotate the blank, I think that made a mark, I think so. And there you've got the perfect size circle for your recess or your tenon, so you know that when you cut that, it will be exactly the right size and the safest size for your jaws. There we go, shameless plug there for Chris Fisher's speed sizer. He invented that and went into partnership with Axminster Tools and Machinery to get it into production. So there we go. Right, I've taken my live centre out now because I don't want wood turner's elbow. Now we need to cut the recess in the bottom of the in the bottom of the blank, and for that we're going to use a, where's it gone? a diamond parting tool for that. And so, excuse me. So the tool rest is, let's find, there we go, there, just change that a little bit. Right, you can see here that the tool is upright, so the tool is resting on its narrowest part, but it is also far enough away from the blank that it's resting on the parallel side of the shaft here, or the shank. We don't want to be cutting down here because it will actually lift the edge into the blank. So make sure that when you're doing this, the tool rest is far enough away that it's resting on the parallel part of the tool, and the handle is parallel to the bed, which is about there. And the tool rest again is at a height where you're cutting on the center line. So the tool rest here is a little bit too low. Let's pull that up a little bit. Just measure that off a tiny bit more. And just there. That will do. So again, the lathe isn't going very quick. It doesn't need to be. My left hand is going to sit over the top of the gouge. I'm keeping my thumb on top of the gouge as well. And then all I'm going to do with the cutting on my side of the vertical center is just push the tool into the wood. I'm going to push down to about 3 or 4 millimeters, and as I've gone down I'm going to pull the tool out, move it along, plunge it in again, and just keep going until we reach our diameter. There. You can be fairly rough doing this. You don't have to tickle the wood. We've got a fairly small cutting edge. And then when you've reached the diameter, you can just come back to the center and make that a little bit deeper. I would suggest somewhere around 6 to 7 millimeters would be deep enough. There, that is that's deep enough. As you can see though, the bottom is a little bit on the rough side, but that's not a problem. We can easily address that, because remember, we're cutting a recess here, as you can see there on your screen. It's a dovetail, and there's a good chance that your jaws will have a dovetail on them for recesses, which will pull the blank onto the jaws when they're mounted correctly. So we need to cut that dovetail, and to cut the dovetail we are going to use a, turn that off, we're going to use a skew chisel. Okay, right. To start with, I want to clean the bottom of the, let's just lose that. I want to clean the bottom of the recess, because it is a little bit torn out in there. And again, I'm presenting the tool this time on the flat side, not like this. Don't cut like this. Cut it flat, so we're using it as a scraper. But the tool rest needs to come up a little bit, because we still need to be cutting on the center line. And if you look in the top left hand corner, the handle is pointing towards me, which will allow me to get the cutting edge parallel to the bottom of the recess here, and then I'll be able to just draw the tool carefully along until I catch the edge or until the edge of the tool meets the edge of the recess. So let's just tidy the bottom up. I'm going to speed the lathe up a tiny little bit. We're now at 700 RPM. Going to move the tool rest in a touch. So again, I'm cutting on the flat side. So the bevel there is clear of the tool rest. Put that in, and then I'm just going to use the skew as a scraper just to clean the bottom of the bowl out. And as you can see, I'm cutting right on the centre line using the skew as a scraper, being careful to lose the shavings as we go. And then if we stop there, you can see that we've got a really nice smooth bottom, but we still haven't got a dovetail. So the tool was in this orientation, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over and then represent the tool with the cutting edge parallel to the bowl itself. Look, you can see that on the screen. And then to put the dovetail in, I'm going to push along this angle here. Not that way, not straight across the parallel edge there, along here, and that will put a nice little dovetail in the recess for you. Is that a good angle? No, I think that one's... Let me just change the angle of this camera a little bit for you. Pull that up, point it down. Okay, right, so I'm going to just hold the tool right on the edge of where the recess is and just push along this line here. Just until the tool gets to the bottom, and there we've got a nice little dovetail that will sit nicely on the jaws when we have shaped it. Right, done. Right, I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions so far? Does anybody have any questions regarding that bit? Dennis Beamish, the Axminster will ship the speed sizer to you in Canada. Oh, if David Hobbs, you're asking about the stream will be available for 7 days after tonight. So I will be removing it from YouTube next Tuesday, but also Saturday's version of this demonstration is also available too. Stephen McElliott, is there a rule how big the recess should be or how open the jaws should be when using a recess? Stephen, that is a fantastic question. Let me show you on another chuck. Oh, this one's heavy. This one's really heavy. Right, if we've got a set of jaws here, look, you can see those jaws. If I just close those jaws a little bit, you can see there. Oh, yeah, I think you can see there that the jaws here are in a perfect circle. That is how your jaws should be inside your recess. So if they're a perfect circle, and your recess is obviously going to be a perfect circle, you will get the best possible grip from the jaws with them in a perfect circle orientation like that. So the jaws are slightly open, but the whole set of jaws makes a perfect circle. That is the perfect size for your recess. If you cut your recess too wide, let me just show you this. if you cut your recess too wide, you can see here that the jaws do not form a perfect circle. So you will only get contact at the 2 or the 4 furthest out points. So here and here, and here and here. So you will not have a suitably good grip inside your recess. So make sure that the recess is set for the correct size of your jaws. If you're not sure what the correct size should be, go back to the jaw manufacturer and check. It's a very important safety aspect that your recess or your tenon is accurately cut for the jaws that you are using. And again, these are dovetail jaws that we're using tonight, so the recess is dovetailed. And if you're using a set of jaws similar to these, you can't see those particularly well, these are gripper jaws that require something that is square cut in both a tenon or a recess. So just make sure that you turn the correct recess or tenon for the jaws that you are using. That's a massive safety point. So well asked there, Stephen McElliott. Adrian Moore, you get bumps as you go across the face initially, similar to the water drop you had a go on the triptych. Would this be because I'm moving as I go? I don't fully understand what you're saying there, Adrian. If you're getting bumps across the face initially, then the actual face itself, I think, judging by what your comment is, the face itself isn't flat to start with. Just once you've established the cut, just take light cuts to start with, and then as it begins to get flatter, you can start to commit to a cut a little bit more aggressively. What angle is the bowl gouge? Paul Tucker, it is 55 degrees. Paul Kavanagh, yes, for the speed sizer. David Steele, what is the handle length of your tools? Right. David, these are standard. These are the standard tools. Now, handle lengths vary, of course, perhaps from manufacturer to manufacturer. The actual handle length of this one is 11 inches, which I personally find a little bit too short. But as I said at the beginning, I'm using standard tools to be fair to beginners. My favourite length is about 13 inches, something like that. So quite a long handle. It gives me a little bit of better control. But for something like this little 9-inch bowl, a standard size gouge handle is more than adequate. Okay, next question. Dolores, what is a registered professional turner? That's a good question, Dolores. Dolores, if you do a Google search for the Register of Professional Turners, or go to the register of professionalturners.co.uk, all of the information is there. I haven't really got time to go into it tonight, but we are supported by the worshipful company of turners that goes back to somewhere around the year 1200. So it's about 800 years old. But Google that and you'll be able to find out everything. Adrian, you're very welcome. Graham Midder, I speed up my RPM as soon as the workpiece is balanced. Why do you keep low speed? Is it the type of wood you're using? Right, Graham Middo, that's another really good question. Why are you turning so quickly? The faster you turn, the bigger an accident can be, the bigger the catch can be. So if you actually turn at a slower speed and improve your tool presentation, you can turn a bowl just as efficiently, but more safely. Should anything happen to the bowl here now, and that's spinning at say 1500 RPM, that bowl can just explode and bounce around all over the workshop. If you turn at a slower speed, below 1000 RPM, the chances are if anything should happen to that piece, it will just drop to the floor or just go plop, rather than pew pew if you do it at a really, really fast speed. So slow that down, improve your tool presentation, and you will be able to turn a bowl just as efficiently and just as well, but in a much safer manner. I see people with injuries and stuff that are showing them off on Facebook. I was turning a bowl at 2,500 revolutions a minute. It's just foolish. There is no need to with good tool presentation, or even with bad tool presentation. There is no need to be turning any size piece too fast. Okay, so I hope that helps. Either long walk, back humidity. Can wood be too dry to turn without problems? Other than it being really, really, really hard, no, not really either. I've got some wood over there from St Paul's Cathedral. I think it's ash, or it might be beech. That's going to be incredibly dry. It might be a little bit crumbly, but for the most part it will be okay. David, right, last question for now. David Hobbs, is there any benefit to having a chunkier or even bar tool rest? I'm still using my standard tool rest. I'm still using the standard tool rest here, David. This is the standard tool rest that came with the lathe. I do have a couple of bar rests here as well. I don't really see any difference in them, to be fair. I like the standard tool rest, and I like the bar rests too. The bar rests do tend to be slightly better quality than the standard ones, being steel. I think the standard rest is iron rather than steel, so the standard rest is a bit easier to dink. I don't think I'm going to time that guy out a little bit, I think, because Kaj Faz Mayot doesn't look like he's saying anything useful. Right, okay, let's have a look at the bottom at the bottom of a bowl now. Let's come back up here. Now, please don't be offended if you have done something like this. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just going to show you a method on how we can get that nicer. I see a lot of, well, first of all, let's just have a look at the shape of a blank. The shape of a blank is essentially a rectangle that way and round that way. So when it's on the lathe, you see it like that, which is basically an upright rectangle, which I find results in pieces that look like this. They're kind of dog bowl-esque, just square, pretty square with the inside hollowed out there. And I see quite a lot of beginners doing this, and they start to say how difficult these inside angles are. These 90-degree angles down here at the bottom, they are essentially box cuts that are not really suited to a gouge, being a bowl gouge or a spindle gouge. So these cuts down here are incredibly difficult with a gouge, and that is where most catches are going to happen, right down at the bottom of a bowl there, if it happens to be in the shape of a dog bowl or a square bowl like this one. So the method I'm going to show you this evening is how to create a nice, elegant, smooth bowl like this one here. You can see the outside has got a nice, smooth, elegant line, and the inside, the inside is just a nice scoop out. And when we do the inside, we're almost going to think of the gouge as being a spoon. So we're just going to scoop the inside out as we go. But all of the lines here are nice and elegant. Don't worry about the thickness of the walls. That's really not important when we're turning our first bowl. The main important thing is to get the tool presentation nice and smooth and accurate, and you can work on the thickness of the walls later. So this is the bowl that we turned the other day on Saturday, and if I get that lined up, you can see there, let's try and get that roughly in line. You can see there that we're kind of echoing the shape of the bowl on the diagram there. Nice, smooth, elegant, flowing lines, nice and easy to turn, virtually catch free. So that's what we're going to do. Now I won't go into this too much because time is ticking on. The foot of your bowl, which is just down here, which finger is it? That one. So there's the foot just there. The foot of a bowl is really important because it lifts the bowl off the surface that it sits on. So the bowl almost looks like it's kind of floating a little bit. Whereas if a bowl doesn't have a foot, then the bowl has a tendency to look like it has just sunk into the surface that it is sitting on. So a foot is nice and important, and it just raises the bowl up just a little bit, and it just improves the appearance, and it is just sort of a little attention to detail too. Now, generally speaking, feet on bowls are about 1/3 of the diameter. Generally speaking, they can vary. I'm not going to go into the wheres and why-fors, whatever, of foot sizes and ratios and stuff like that. Just take it as read that feet are generally about 1/3 of the diameter of the piece. If you want to Google the rule of thirds, then please do go ahead when we're finished. It's fascinating, the rule of thirds, and then when you've read about the rule of thirds, then go ahead and start researching the golden ratio. Really, really interesting. So let's just take that off and then come back to here. So here's our blank. Remember that from minutes and minutes and minutes ago. And you do need to be careful when you have turned a recess, because if you put, let's just put a little mark on there. If you decide that this is 1/3, which it is roughly, when you shape the bowl, all of this wood over here is going to disappear, and it will leave you with a tiny little amount of wood here, and it is going to be just this wood here that I've just coloured in that is going to be holding the bowl on the blank. So for something like this, we're going to need a slightly bigger foot, somewhere around there. So we've got slightly more wood to be acting as the anchor when we hold that onto the when we hold this bowl onto the chuck with the recess. Does that make sense? I hope so. So here's the mark for the foot, and I'm going to come back to the overhead camera now and just have a little mouthful of water. There are two ways that we can turn a bowl with a gouge. One is like this, which is a pull cut. And in much the same way, the pull cut with a gouge for the outside of a bowl is exactly the same as when we actually squared it off in the first place. We're pulling the gouge through the wood. And the other way is a push cut, where we're actually pushing the gouge through the wood like that. The push cut is something that requires a huge amount of practice, because you can be right on the verge of a catch all the way through all the way through the cut, because the cutting edge itself is pointing virtually straight up, and you're really close to the toe as well. Can you see that? Just there. So the push cut is a fantastic cut. It's incredibly efficient, but very, very difficult for beginners to be picking up straight away. So the method I'm going to show you this evening is the pull cut. Okay, now the first thing we've got to do is we need to lose this wood here, all of this wood round here, and we can then start to pull the curve around. It's just, can I get that? No. Okay, but I can just lift that up just a little bit. I want to try and get the real chuck lined up with the chuck in the diagram, so it's about there-ish. So you guessed it, again, oh, wrong button, get the buttons right. So again, we're looking at the tool rest being at a height that the gouge is presented on the centre line. Let me just move this camera so I can show you a bit better. Let's dip it down a tiny bit. Come on. There we go. Right, so the tool is at a height, the tool rest rather, is at a height that the tool is presented on the centre line. The centre line there. Turn the lathe on after we've checked that the tools are not going to hit the rest. And all I'm going to do to start with is just eat away at the corner. It's just start to eat away. The handle's down again. You should be able to see in the top left hand corner of your screen. The handle's down and the flute's open at about 45 degrees. So if this is 0 degrees with the flute pointing straight up, rotate it over about 45 degrees and that will give you a nice tool presentation. Just change the angle so you can see on this screen, on this view, the handle's down. So when the handle's down, we're slicing the wood, not chopping it. And my left hand again is just acting as a guide and to stop the gouge bouncing up and down. The handle's into my hip, you can't see that, but the handle is into my hip. And as the cut gets longer, I can start to reach round and swing my bum round a little bit as well, and then start to pull a curve around where I want to be. So you can just see a curve beginning to form. Let's just move this camera back out a little bit. I just need to change this angle slightly. There we go. And move the tool rest in a bit as well. And you can see that although the handle is down and we're pulling the cut through, we're actually getting a really nice cut here. There's not a huge amount of tear out, and that is because with the gouge down, we're actually slicing. You can see, let's bring this in. This may be a little bit out of focus for you, but that's the best I can do at the minute. So you can actually see with the gouge and the handle pointed down, the shavings that are coming off in spirals. So we're actually slicing the wood rather than trying to chop it or scrape it. Let's just turn that up. Okay. Start the lathe again. So the handle's down, the lathe is at 700 RPM, and because we're just losing wood at the minute, we can be quite aggressive in our cuts. And with the handle down, remember that we're slicing, not chopping, so we can afford to be quite aggressive in taking these cuts. And you can see from the overhead camera we're beginning to get a nice shape beginning to form, but we've got to put our little foot on. Just going to put this camera back over this side. We need to put our foot on. There we go. You can see on the diagram, just here we've got a nice curved foot that blends nicely into the shape of the bowl over there. And for that, I'm going to use the natural curve of the gouge. Let's just come back to the gouge there. You can see here, just here, we've got a nice little curve at the top round the toe. We can use that to our benefit when it comes to putting on the foot of the bowl just here. So if I start the lathe, I can show you what I mean. So I can present the tool, the handle's down again still, and I'm just going to push that gouge in carefully and then pull out. Now you can't see that, but the profile of the foot there is exactly the same as the toe of the gouge, and I can just pull that round, and you might be able to see from the overhead, if I just put the gouge back into position there, you might be able to see that. It might be a little bit difficult, but that is how we put on a foot. So we've got a nice little curve just here, and now we can start pulling this curve all the way round to the top of the blank. So I'm going to adjust the tool rest to kind of perpendicular to the angle where we want to go. Handle down, remember, you see that, the handle's down, and now I can start pulling this curve round to where I want it to be. Let's go back to the overhead. You can see now that we're beginning to pull the curve nice and evenly round the blank, and the edge has actually gone on this, so I need to sharpen it. Don't forget to sharpen your gouge. If the gouge stops cutting nicely, then stop and sharpen it. There's nothing worse than trying to... Hang on a second. There we go. There's nothing worse than trying to hack your way through a blank with a dull bowl gouge. So if you feel that it's not cutting as it should do, stop, sharpen, go back to it. It will be a much more enjoyable process for you, cutting with a nice sharp bowl gouge, and it is also safer too. So let's go back over here. We've got the overhead camera on. We've got a really nice shape beginning to appear here, and there's our diagram just there of the cut that we're doing. Just kick the shavings out the way a little bit. So the handle's still down, but remember we've got the tool rest is straight. The tool rest is just a rest. It's not necessarily, at this point at least, a guide for cutting in a straight line. So we need to forget that the rest is straight, and by swinging our bum round a bit and keeping the tool in the same relative position, sorry, let me explain that a bit better. By keeping our tool in the same relative position at the beginning of the cut to the end of the cut, we can ensure that we get a nice even curve. I've got a little lump just here, I think you can see that. So I've just moved the tool rest back down, and then I can just blend that curve to speed the lathe up a little bit. if I just change the camera angle as well, you can see that the tool rest is, the tool is still angled down, so I'm slicing the wood as it comes over the top, of the gouge. And we'll get that curve right the way round to the top, right the way around to the top of the bowl. One more cut. There we are, that'll do. And there you can see that we've got a really nice, elegant shape as illustrated in the diagram here. We've got a nice curve on the foot, and the foot blends into a nicely curving wall just here. Now, strictly speaking, oops, wrong button, sorry, change that. Strictly speaking, the recess of the bowl is not strictly speaking finished, because ideally we don't want to be able to see our chucking point when we're done, but we're going to ignore that for now, and we're going to put just a little bit of decoration on the bottom here. So the first thing we've got to do is dress the foot by just cutting it inwards slightly, ever so slightly undercutting it. So I can do that very simply, just again with the handle down, and I can just make a little cut. Just to angle the foot down. Now what that does is that it ensures that the bowl just sits on this outside edge of the foot. So if the piece should warp or wobble a little bit, by just sitting on there will ensure that it doesn't wobble around too much. And I think the camera's just lost its focus, so I will just repair that for you. So if you bear with me a second, let me just sort this camera out a little bit. There's nothing worse than not having something in focus. Harvey Klein, hi Harvey, thank you very much. Turn that autofocus on, come on. Turn that off, lovely. I think that's better. Right, a little bit more water. Right, so let's have a look at decorating. Just putting some very simple decoration on the bottom of our foot here. I'm not going to go into any finishing or any sanding tonight because there just isn't time. It's already 9 o'clock. So we're not going to look at sanding. I will put together a beginner's sanding demonstration for a later date, but for now we're not going to worry about it. And also, in the style of this demonstration, just using the standard set of tools, I'm going to use the corner of the skew, or the tip of the skew here, to put some lines into the foot. Just some very simple little lines, just to add a little bit of interest into this otherwise relatively ugly recess. So the tool, I've brought the tool rest up, so when the tool is presented, again we're cutting right on the centre line. Let's pull that camera up and point it down a little bit. There we go. So just the tip of the skew's lying flat on the tool rest. Start the lathe, and then I'm just going to put the corner of the skew just into the wood there, just to add a few little lines, and then a couple there. just like that. And now that has just added a little bit of interest to the foot, just to help to disguise the chucking point a little bit. Right, so that is the outside of the bowl done. Now we need to think about reverse mounting that onto our chuck, which again is a good time to stop for some questions just while I take the faceplate off. So if anybody's got any questions at this point, please do type them now. Dennis, please don't confuse the this demonstration with how you teach your own pupils. Thomas Kroll, I often get a lot of vibration on the tool. It almost starts to spiral. Any ideas? At what point does that happen, Thomas? Buster, thank you very much. Hello in the Philippines. Thomas, I think Thomas Kroll, can you drop me an email? I've got a proposal for you. Don't take that the wrong way. I've got a proposal for you. So if you can drop me an email via my website this evening, I'll be able to follow up on that with you tomorrow. Well, any other questions on what you've just seen there? Oh, okay, Thomas, we're not at the cutting into the bowl part just yet, but do send me that email anyway. I think I know what you're talking about now. You're getting a little kick. You're getting a little kickback when you get to hollow into the bowl, yeah. Graham Middow, I'm not concentrating on any finishing tonight. We are just looking at turning techniques. Lauren Becker, when you put the design onto the top of your bowl, would it be inappropriate to use a round nose scraper? Lauren, no, it wouldn't. It wouldn't, but you will get a better finish if you use a gouge. Brilliant, Thomas. Thank you very much. Oh, another question, Thomas. This is going to sound really inappropriate. Thomas, have you got a webcam? That's going to sound very inappropriate. Paul Kavanagh, hello. Right, okay, I'm going to move on. Let's come back over here. Now, if I bring up the recess diagram, you can see there that we essentially have now. Oops. There it is. So that is essentially what we've got now. We've got a bowl that's got the outside shaped, and we've got a recess in the bottom. Now, if you look carefully at the diagram there, you can see, get my finger in the right direction, just there, that the bowl at the bottom on the foot here is not touching the jaw, the base of the jaw there. So that is really important. It's really, really important that when the bowl is placed on the jaws, all of the support for the bowl comes off the top of the jaw here, as shown in the diagram. That's really important. If the bowl bottoms out onto the jaws, you will actually get a very unstable, or potentially very unstable, fixing. So make sure that and then turn that one off. Make sure that you've got a gap behind the bowl and that the chuck is supported, or sorry, the bowl is supported on the top of the jaws inside the recess. And then expand the jaws into the recess, making sure it's nice and flush fitting. And just go round. Don't put too much pressure when expanding the jaws. If I pull that diagram up again, if you look at the red arrows, if you look at the red arrows down here, that's where you're putting pressure. So what I was saying earlier about the width of the foot, that is really all that is holding the bowl onto the chuck at this point. And also, if it's too wide, you've got a lot of pressure pushing out on the recess there. And when you start spinning the lathe, Graham Middow, if you're using a recess like this, you've got a lot of pressure pushing out like this, and the faster you spin the lathe, the greater the physical forces that are pushing the bowl apart. So with a recess method and a high speed or even a low speed, all of the forces are working to explode. Sorry, wrong button. All of the forces are working to explode that piece. So the easier the tension you put on your chuck and the slower you can turn, the less danger there is of this piece disintegrating into 1,000 pieces and bouncing around all over your workshop. And it's also worth mentioning that spalted beech, hang on a second, that spalted beech like this piece here is inherently weak because of the spalting lines running through it. So perhaps you would want to think twice about putting a recess into spalted beech, because everything wants to blow that piece apart. So just be very cautious when mounting spalted beech using a recess method. Okay, any further questions? Martin, how often would you have to renew jaws? It's a good question, Gary. I never have. The jaws that are on here at the moment, they are about 4 years old, something like that. They certainly feel pretty sturdy still, so I don't feel I need to change them. David Hobbs, is there a minimum depth for a recess for a bowl diameter? David Hobbs, that's another very good question. You can turn off, if you've got jaws that are fairly sharp on the dovetail, you can turn off a very, very small recess. Let me show you this one. There we go. Let me show you this recess here. This is on a 20-inch platter, and I think you might be able to see the recess here. It's tiny. It's only about 3mm, 4mm tops with that. So if you've got a decent set of jaws with a very, very acute, very sharp angle on the dovetail, you can turn off a tiny, tiny little recess. but for beginners I would definitely err on the side of caution and do not turn off anything shallower than say 5mm, something like that, just to be on the safe side until you get your tool presentation accurate, consistently accurate, and you're not getting catches particularly regularly, because obviously the thinner the recess, the less forgiving the piece is going to be in the event of a catch. And any other questions before we look at the inside? I love turning the inside of bowls. You're welcome, Gary Jones. Right, let me just sharpen the gouge again. It's always worth sharpening the gouge when you switch from the outside to the inside, just so you know you've got a nice fresh edge for doing the inside. Go. Angela in New Zealand. Hi Angela, nice to meet you. Right, okay. Let's look at turning the inside. Now, just the same as we did on the back face of the bowl, we need to plane off the front side here. So again, the tool rest is set to a height that when I present the tool, it is cutting right on the centre line. You can just see the centre there, so I'm going to line the cutting edge of the wing up here and just guide the tool along the face, nice and easy. Oh, that just rode over the hole for the faceplate just there. There we go. Right, so there we have a nice smooth face. Now the method I'm going to show you today works from essentially the inside out. But remember at the very beginning, I was mentioning that we're going to be thinking about the bowl gouge as a spoon. So we're going to scoop the inside of the bowl out. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to start working from the middle here outwards. If you want to turn a thin wall, you generally work from the outside in, but like the bowl that I've been showing you this evening, oops, wrong one. There. Like the bowl we're going to be doing this evening, the walls are fairly chunky. They're not unattractive. But they are much more stable, and by turning a bowl in this particular manner, you can really make sure that your tool presentation is good, and practice that before we start trying to cut really thin walled bowls. So let's just have a look at a little bit of the technique. You will hear people saying all the time, rub the bevel, rub the bevel, rub the bevel. If you rub the bevel, rubbing implies applying pressure. Now that's not strictly the case when it comes to bowl turning. You need the bevel to be in contact with the wood, but it is certainly not rubbing. Call it floating, gliding, caressing, whatever. It's not putting pressure on. Because if you do put pressure on, you're in danger of over-rotating in the cut, which is when the cut drops. So hopefully all of this will become clear as we go through in a minute. But there, I've put some diagrams together that show you 3 key positions of the gouge throughout the cut. The first one is here, position 1, right at the beginning of the cut. You can see, if you have a look there, you can see that the bevel is parallel to that black arrow, which is a direction of travel. And then if we look at position 2, we're halfway through the cut now, we're halfway from the top, to the bottom of the bowl, and the bevel there is still parallel to that arrow showing the direction of travel. And then again at the bottom of the bowl, the flute now, look, you can see there in position 3, the flute is now open, but we'll worry about that later. But the bevel is still parallel to the direction of travel. And if I show you all 3 of those together, you can see how the gouge has changed position from position 1 through position 2 through to position 3. And the bevel remains parallel to that arrow showing the direction of travel all the way through the cut. I hope that is making sense. I hope that is making sense to you. Let me just show you those again. Position 1, position 2, position 3. The bevel is always in contact, albeit light contact, with the wood throughout the entire cut. Now let's put that into a little bit of practice, and I will also show you the reasons why some of you may be getting those spirally marks all the way down through the bowl, and there is a really easy fix for that. So let's come back to the bowl here. Again, I'm going to make sure that the tool rest is at the right height, so when the cut is at the bottom or the end of the cut, the cutting edge is just coming past the centre mark. So what we'll do is we'll take a couple of cuts. We're going to take one cut from about here, and then another one from about there, and then one more from about there. And I'll put that diagram back up and change the camera. So here we are at position 1. So if I start there, position 1, you can see that the gouge is virtually in exactly the same position as the diagram. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure into the rest and just pull the handle round towards me and open the flute. So when I'm at position 3, just there, look, you can see that my tool and that in the diagram are virtually in exactly the same position. Let's look at that cut from the front camera. The flute's open again about 45 degrees. So if straight up is 0 degrees, roll it over about 45 degrees. A little bit of pressure into the rest just to engage the cut, and then pull the handle towards you and keep the bevel in contact with the wood all the way down. Let's take a slightly bigger cut. And you can see there that we've got a super smooth finish on the surface of the wood there. Let's just take another cut. Little bit of pressure into the rest. Push and pull and open the flute a little bit just to finish off the cut. And there we've got again a super smooth surface. Now I'm going to zoom the camera in a little bit. I didn't do this on Saturday, so you'll just have to bear with me a minute. There, configure video. Zoom in, there we go. And I'll just double check the focus as well. Whoop, that's just dropped the gouge on the floor. I might have to resharpen that. Okay. Okay, there we go. We've got a much nicer view there for you. Yeah, I've just dinked the edge of that, so please excuse me. I'll just put those angles back up for you to have a look at while I sharpen the gouge again. There we go. So let's take another cut, but before I do that, have a look at this diagram. As you can see there, the tool rest is below the centre line, and the tool will be cutting just above centre, sorry, on the centre line, but it will rise up and then come back down to the centre throughout the cut. Now, obviously, I've got a 20-inch swing here, so I can get the handle quite a long way down when it comes to doing this particular cut. But those of you who have got a shallower swing, maybe 9, 10, 11 inches, something like that, maybe 12, you'll have to bring the handle up a little bit. But the principle of pushing up into the cut is exactly the same. So I'll just show you what I mean. I'll leave that diagram on screen just for a minute and turn the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Ooh. There we go. Get it up right. There we are. Right, so if I start the lathe, you can see that I've got the handle down. The handle's down here, and I'm going to push up into the cut. So I'm now above centre, and then the tool is coming back down, or the tip of the tool is coming back down to the centre. I hope you can see that. Let's do that again. Up, above centre, and then back down again. I'm going to speed the lathe up a little bit. The lathe, if anybody's interested, is running at 800 RPM. Pop. There we go, and if I stop that there and turn that off. These marks here are obviously the faceplate screws, but that surface there is absolutely lovely. Now, what happens if you happen to get a little dimple in the bottom of the bowl, so it goes down and then it comes back up again? I'll show you exactly what's happening. Is you're taking the cut and you actually reach the bottom of the cut at this point here. So this is the bottom of the cut here, and then what you do is you over rotate the gouge, which leaves you with that sort of little nipply thing at the bottom. Let's just move that round there and you'll be able to see. So there you can see we've over rotated the gouge. So instead of, if we look here at position 3, position 3 has actually been extended further round towards the tool rest, which pulls the bevel out further, if that makes sense. I hope that does. So at the bottom of the cut, the tool should be sort of in this position here. Let me just put the overhead on. So at the bottom of the cut here, you can see that my tool here is parallel to position 3, which is there. But in the cut that I've just demonstrated, where you get the nipple at the bottom, the cut is actually further round here. So the bevel has actually gone past parallel to the bottom of the bowl and started to point back outwards again. That's easily rectifiable if you correct the tool presentation at the bottom of the bowl and you just eat that away, and then you stop at the bottom. Let me just hold that position there and pull the diagram back up, and you can see again that my gouge is virtually parallel to position 3 on the diagram. And then by doing it like that, you'll end up with a nice rounded bottom to your bowl. How's that? Let me take a few more cuts out of here, because I want to show you how to get over a common problem Again, we've got a super smooth finish to there. Now, by using this particular technique and imagining that the gouge is a spoon, so we're scooping the wood out, we are virtually catch free. If you reverse the tool and try to back hollow, what can happen there with back hollowing is the shoulder with a back hollow is going to catch. If you look at the tool in the orientation that I've got it here, the flute is pointing away from the cutting side, and the shoulders are also away from from where the cut is. So we're cutting right round the top of the tool here. So by hollowing out like this, we've got a much safer method of hollowing out a bowl than trying to back hollow like this. Now, a lot of you may well end up with marks like this. Let me just see if I can show you. I'll just make this a little bit wider. So the tool's coming up and then back down to the centre, and the flute is opening slowly, and there we are at the middle. There we go, we've got a nice rounded bottom to our bowl there. Leisure Cut Sand Wax Admire, thank you, you're very welcome, and thank you for your donation too. So that's how to get rid of the bottom, that's how we're making the cut nice and safely. But one big issue I see beginners talking about online is those really nasty marks that you get on the inside of a bowl. Let me see if I can show you what they are. So you're turning a bowl, and you end up with marks like this, all really ridgy and everything else like that. We've all done it, and a lot of people still do it. There's loads of tear out in there as well. Now, what happens with that is this. If you look at this diagram here, you can see the gouge is actually in the gouge itself is actually in position or orientation number 1, but in position number 2. And if you can see there, the bevel is actually away from the wood, and that is why you're getting all of those ridges, and that's because you're doing what I call pushing the toe. So your left hand is doing more of the work and pushing the toe through the piece. So you're actually slicing right down across the toe rather than having the wood being cut slightly off the toe. Now let's compare that to the correct position 2. Can you see the difference? In where we've got the bad cut here and the good cut there. The good cut is where the bevel is parallel to the direction of travel, but in the bad cut here, it's not parallel. So the bevel is off the wood, and that's why you're getting those really nasty marks down here. So at position 2, let me show you again here. Let me just go to the overhead camera. The gouge here is now incorrect. If I show you that, the gouge here is incorrect, and you can see if I follow that through, the gouge is in position 2, but in the same orientation for position 1. What I actually need is to have the gouge round here, which will pull the bevel back onto the wood. Now that happens, let me show you it again. That happens because you start off at position 1 really well, but then the bevel comes off the wood and you end up, the bevel comes off the wood and the gouge is still in the orientation for position 1, which is up here, but you're pushing the toe through the wood rather than trying to pull it through. Does that make sense? Jeremy Ollenbuttle, that is the same It's exactly the same principle for all gouges. If you keep that bevel glancing over the wood, you will get a much better, much smoother cut. That doesn't matter if it's a 45-degree bevel, a 35-degree bevel, 55 in this case, 65 or 70. So long as you keep that bevel lightly in contact with the wood, you will get a super smooth finish. So let me just show you that again. So we've got these really nasty rings here. So we can tidy that up just purely by improving our tool presentation and keeping the bevel in contact with the wood. So here we go. The bevel's in contact with the wood. There's position 2. And then we're coming round to position 3. And then just nibble that off, and then as you can see there, just with that correct tool presentation, you get a much smoother surface to the inside of your cut. It takes practice, because you've got to pull the gouge round, you've got to push it up, and you've got to slightly open the flute as you go, and it's much more sort of that kind of action. And it does take practice, but once you get it, practice and practice and practice. So let me just show you that again. Take those off. If you're getting those rings and those nasty spirals in the inside of your bowl, it's because your gouge is in the incorrect position. You haven't changed the orientation of the gouge as you're going through. Your gouge is remaining in position 1 or orientation 1 when it moves down into sort of halfway down the cut into position 2. So if you just keep the gouge moving, you can see there on the diagram where the fulcrum and the pivot point over the top of the tool rest changes, and keep that bevel in contact with the wood all the way down, not pushing into it, just keeping it in contact with the wood all the way down, you will immediately eliminate all of those really nasty ridges that you get. So I hope that was helpful. Paul Straker, the speed of the lathe at the moment is 801. There you go, Paul Straker, that's the speed of the lathe at the moment. Ivor Longwalk, it's all very well explained, but is there a way you can ensure that you keep the bevel running parallel while doing the cut? Yeah, concentrate. You've got to let me try and explain it a little bit better with the overhead camera. So here I'm in position 1, here is position 2, and here is position 3. Ideally, what you need to do, if you want to turn parallel walls, is to get the gouge to. Oh, let me show you on top of the bowl here. Is to get the gouge to follow, or to get the bevel to follow the outside wall parallel. It takes practice and practice and practice to get it to run down through there nice and accurately, but it's not impossible, and it does literally just take practice, Ivor. Let me just show you that again, and I'll go through it really easily step by step. My left hand here isn't doing very much. I'm putting a little bit of pressure into the rest to stop the gouge bouncing backwards like this. So a little bit of pressure into the rest just to engage the cut, and then I'm pushing down, I'm pushing in and up, and I'm twisting the gouge towards me at the same time, and I'm looking down here to make sure that the cut is running, or the bevel is running in contact with the wood all the way down. And if I drop the cut, if I over rotate, I'm going to put the gouge back into the position that it should be and follow it through. Now that's really nice, that running at 800 running at 800 RPM. That barely needs any sanding at all. So Graham, I can't remember your surname, Graham, I hope this has shown you that you don't need to be turning at thousands of miles an hour. Keep the lathe running slow and you'll be able to turn a perfectly acceptable bowl with decent decent tool presentation. And Stuart in Guernsey, Stuart Ingruil, says one of your mentors says treat every cut as a practice for a final cut. Yes, absolutely. You could just hack this bowl out if you wanted to. The more you hack at a bowl, the greater the chance of getting a catch, but the more efficiently you can cut the wood away and butcher that wood out, even with a really aggressive cut. Let me show you what I mean. If you take a really aggressive cut to get rid of wood, you can still end up with a really nice surface to the inside of your bowl. So let's take a really big cut. There we go. That's almost, there we are. That's almost the full length of the wing. And that surface there is still just as good as it was when I was taking lighter, finer cuts. And it all just takes just a little bit of practice just to get everything in the right orientation. Throughout the cut. Now let me show you how to pick up a cut. So imagine that you're cutting a bowl, you're cutting the inside of a bowl, and you get your body into the wrong position, or you drop the cut or something like that. Let me show you how you can really quickly and easily pick up that cut after you've made a mistake or you've dropped the cut or whatever. So we'll take a cut from the top, we'll go about halfway down. Oops. Oh, you didn't see that. Sorry, let me do that again. Let me just finish this cut off. Right, let's take another cut. We're going to run about halfway down. Oh, and we've dropped the cut. Alan Smith, thank you very much. You're very welcome all the way in Swaddling Coat. So here we are. The cut started nicely and then we dropped it. And I did actually properly drop it because I looked at the screen. So I want to pick that cut up. Now what we'll do, rather than start with the gouge at the beginning of the cut in position 1, like this, because we need to pick the cut up somewhere around position 2. So holding the gouge in the orientation for position 1, let me just change the camera, is not ideal. So we actually need to pick the cut up from position 2 when the gouge handle is much closer towards me, and I can approach the position where I need to cut, where I need to pick the cut up with the bevel in contact with the wood, and then I can just roll it in and pick the cut up and finish the cut as if nothing had ever happened. Oops. There we go. And you'd barely notice that I've picked that cup halfway through. Stuart, don't be rude, I'm not making a basin. And you, Leisure. I'm not going any deeper though. Right. So that is the inside of a bowl. Now I'm just going to zoom. No, I'm not. I'm going to leave that where it is and just rotate the camera over here to the rim. Now you would have seen on all of the diagrams this evening Pop, there we go. If you look at the rim there, the rim is not actually flat. The rim here is not actually flat. It's got a very slight little scoop out of it, a little scallop, and that just makes it slightly different. Just because the blank is square doesn't mean any of the angles have to be square, and a bowl with a flat rim like that is a missed opportunity to make something, just a tiny little attention to detail. And here's the rim that we put in the one on Saturday, and when you pick the bowl up, it actually becomes a little bit like a thumb handle. Your thumb can just sit in there quite happily, quite comfortably, and very securely as well. So we can do that very easily with the gouge just on the rim here. This one is a slightly thinner rim than the one we did on Saturday, and we can do that really simply. If you imagine that we're just facing the piece off like we did at the beginning of both sides, we can just start to make that cut a little bit deeper, and just by swinging the handle round, you might be able to see with the overhead camera. Let me see if I can do it. I need to drop the tool rest. So we're cutting on the centre line again. So you can just twist the tool into there, or you can do it the other way, like you're hollowing out a bowl. I'll show you the other camera. Just like that, and you can keep the bevel in contact with the wood just the same all the way through, just as if you were hollowing out the centre. And there was a lady earlier on who was asking whether or not it would be acceptable to do it with a round nose scraper. Yes, you could if you want to. Here is a standard round nose scraper. You could do that just as easily with the tool, with the tool rest at centre height, or rather the tool rest at a height that the tool is presented on the centre line. So keep it flat, and then I normally hold the handle up a little bit, and then you can just ease that in there. So that's the other option for you if you wanted to do that. And as you can see, we've got a nice little scallop, and my thumb sits nice and securely in there. Atavata, you're very welcome. When turning the inside of a bowl, I often get a very strange, almost like screaming, high-pitched sound while the wall gets thinner. Atavata, that is basically the wood beginning to flap, and it doesn't like flapping very much. And I bet you anything you like, when you stop the lathe, you get kind of deep sort of spiral marks in there as well. That's because as the wood's going round, it's bouncing off the tool, and it goes, "Ah, I don't like this." That's where the high-pitched screaming comes from, because the wood's beginning to flap and it's getting too thin. So in order to correct that, what you need to do is actually turn the bowl in the other way. So start from the outside and just cut. I mean, it's very difficult for me to explain, but you basically cut down a little bit at a time, and then once you've cut this bit over here, don't go back to it, and then you just keep going down like that. I might do a video about it, but that is basically how you avoid it. It's nothing strange, it's nothing out of the ordinary, but it does mean that you don't get a nice smooth finish, because you'll get those shake marks from where the wood is flapping. Oh, Lauren, sorry. Sorry, Lauren. That's embarrassing. Yes, and anti-vatter, yeah, it can be avoided with a slightly different cut, which I'm not going to show you this evening because it is a slightly advanced cut where you actually have to reverse the position of the bowl gouge. So definitely not showing you that one tonight. I'm so sorry, Lauren. Mike Walt, thank you very much. Cheers, Mike. Silk, any chance you could see my last comment, please, referring grinds? Oh yeah, right. So for silk, what's the benefit of longer grinds on the bowl gouge, such as Irish ground? Are there any benefits or just personal choice? Yes, there are some benefits, and unfortunately, the only bowl gouge I had with a standard grind on silk, I sharpened up for the Robert Sorby Pro Edge demonstration last week. But I think I might be able to show you. Yes, I can show you. Sorry. I'm going to have to show you on a spindle gouge rather than a bowl gouge, but the principle is exactly the same. Let's look at a standard spindle gouge here. Standard spindle gouge, and if I turn it around here, you can see that we've got a very short wing on here. This is a standard grind. There's almost no wing on there at all. So where you get most catches will be on the shoulders. Let me just pull the diagram up. Although this is a diagram of a bowl gouge, it's exactly the same principle or exactly the same positions for a spindle gouge, but the flute and the actual tool itself is a little bit smaller. Lauren Becker, I know the girl's spelling, but seeing as I don't know where in the world you are, your locality may spell the name differently. So again, apologies. I'll remember for next time, Lauren. Right. So there's the gouge. There's the spindle gouge. We've got the cutting edge is very close, or the cutting edge is quite short compared to where the shoulders are. But then if I show you my long grind, you can see that we've got a much longer cutting edge. So the toe and the cutting edge, we've got a greater distance from the toe to the shoulder. So we've got a greater length that we can play with. We've got a greater length that we can play with there, Silk, and it's the same with the bowl gouge. And also you can take with the tool presentation that I've shown you this evening, you can take mighty great cuts with good tool presentation and not get catches. Oh, Wisconsin, USA, cool. Again, sorry, Lauren Becker. It was unintentional. Bob Daly, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Bob. Right, let's take the bowl off the. Let's take the bowl off there. And right, there we go. David Hobbs, do you use a different grind or gouge for a deeper bowl, or do you always use the 55 degree? Yeah, David, good question. This gouge here, my half-inch gouge, is actually is actually 60 degrees. So on deeper bowls, I would use this one, but I would always do my best to use the 3/8 gouge for finishing cuts. A 3/8 gouge is absolutely beautiful. for putting finishing cuts on. And the deeper the bowl, the steeper the angle of the bevel needs to be, so you can get round the corners without catching the top of the bowl on the shank. But for most of the stuff that I turn, a 55-degree bevel such as this one is more than adequate. Keith Calloway, what causes back run when starting a cut near the edge of a bowl? Slightly incorrect tool presentation, Keith. You can correct that by putting a little bit more pressure into the tool rest and getting the tool in confidently, not quickly, but just firmly saying you are going in here. Don't be too light with it. You've got to tell the wood that you're the boss. So keep the handle down a little bit. If you've got a gouge that's 45 degrees, 50 degrees or 55 degrees, just keep that flute closed a little bit. I'll see if I can show you again. Bear with me a second while I put the bowl back on. Glasses, get that tool rest in. Turn that one off. Turn it off. Come on, go. Ah, there it is. Found the right button. Okay, if you look here, Keith, the gouge is almost completely rolled over to 90 degrees. So you've got open flute here at 0 degrees or 12 o'clock. There's 45 degrees and there's 90. I'm going to roll that right the way over to about 80 degrees, something like that. Put a little bit of pressure into the rest, and there we go. I've established the cut, and then whoops, I've established the cut. There's a little bit of pressure going into the rest. There's the screaming that one of you was talking about, and then you can address the cut from there. There we are, Keith. So keep that, keep the gouge rolled quite a long way over. Pressure, push in to establish the cut. Then you can release the pressure a little bit and begin to pull the gouge round to complete the cut. Okay. Lauren, what size gouge do you start out with? I'd start out with this one, Lauren. In the standard set of tools, certainly here in the UK, this is known as a 3/8 gouge. Over in the States, your gouges are measured slightly differently, but this is a standard gouge. So I'm not entirely certain what you would call this over in the US, but here it is certainly a 3/8 gouge. Because we measure it, we measure our gouges across the entire shank, and I believe in the States you measure them across the top of the flute, which is a different measurement. Thin Ice Baseman, you're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. You're welcome, James. Right, okay, 10:02 p.m. over here. Does anybody have any questions or queries or anything like that I can go into before we have to go to bed? Frankly, it's getting late. Do you ever use a 1/4 inch gouge? Certainly not for bowls, David. 1/4 quarter-inch gouge would be more like a spindle gouge, really. Jim, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. And Stephen McElliott, thank you for your donation too. I'm glad you appreciated it. Oh, that's good news, Gary. You've learned something on both of these demonstrations. Fab. Mitch Mitchell, great demo. You're very welcome. Thank you. I don't have a lathe yet. Trying to decide between 12-inch Laguna or a Jet MIDI. Any thoughts? Oh, Mitch. Oh, isn't it nice? Isn't it nice trying to decide what toys to buy? I really like Jet lathes. They are basically exactly the same, or pretty much exactly the same as Powermatics. And if I was being given a choice, if somebody said to me, you can have this Jet or this Laguna, I think I would say I want the Laguna, personally. How would you mount a sported ash blank, says Tom Lazarus? I would mount it with a faceplate initially, and then with a proper sized tenon on the reverse to do the inside. Silk, thank you very much. Thanks, Chris Cox. Oh, Andy McRae, 5:15 start. Ooh, poor you. Marky Snot, yeah, no worries. It will be available for 7 days after tonight, so it will come off, or it will come away from being public a week today, and then 3 weeks after that, it will be available to view again on my website if you want to. Oh, Lauren, you lost all of your notes. Well, the other demo is still available to watch if you want to go back and watch that, but I covered exactly the same stuff as I did on Saturday tonight for you. Scott Hampton, you're very welcome in Central California. Mike Doyle, hi Mike, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Mike. You're awesome, thank you. Eric McRae, yes, my son has beaten his target of £500 raised. He's really excited to be making even more masks for the NHS. He's a very excited young man. Jim, thank you. You're very welcome. Ed Stone, how do you turn off your tenons? I use those jaws up there, Ed, set of coal jaws, but I've also got a vacuum chuck here which I also use as well, but between the two I actually prefer using the coal jaws rather than the vacuum chuck. Any other questions at all? Oh, let me show you the let me show you the oops. Let me show you the finished piece, as it were. That will be sensible. So there we go. Objective achieved of a nice beginner's bowl with a nice, simple, easy, virtually catch-free technique. We've got a nice. There it is. We've got a nice hole in the bottom that we have kind of disguised with those little lines. We've got an elegant shape to the outside. It's not quite exactly the same as the diagram on screen, but that's because we've got a slightly narrower, we've got a slightly different proportioned piece, but we still have a nice elegant shape to the outside and a nice scooped out bowl on the inside, and there's not a dog bowl in sight. And I think for any of you who have not turned a bowl before, or are struggling with your technique, I really do hope that the techniques I've shown you this evening will go some way to helping you turn much nicer, smoother bottom bowls and help you get away from doing dog bowls like this, because these corners down here are much more suited to boxes rather than bowls. Ed, no worries, it's going to be here for a week, so you can go back and watch it whenever you like. Okay, still 353 people tonight, still watching. So if anybody has any other questions at all before I wave goodbye to everybody for the evening, then please do ask. Please do ask away. The next demonstration will be. Oh, hang on. Oh, you're very welcome, Leisure. It is. It's been a lot of fun learning how to do all this over the last sort of 3 weeks to a month, but I am taking a week off demonstrations from tonight. There are a few things I want to change around on the actual presentation and the setup, and also I want to get into a routine where the Tuesday night demonstration is a lead demonstration before I repeat it on a Tuesday on a Saturday daytime. So you guys on a Tuesday from next week will see the debut demonstration, and then anybody who watches on Saturday, that will be the repeat content. But a week today is going to be using the intrinsic colour collection up there, but using the white in order to turn them into really gorgeous pastel shades, which is not something you see demonstrated very often, but the effect is really nice and really quite spring-like too. So that'll be the demonstration next week. Stream starts at 7 o'clock as usual, with the demonstration kicking off at 7:30. And I need to find some wood to actually do it with. So yeah, Tom, live again next Tuesday. Let me just show you the here's a piece that I've actually messed up a little bit, which I need to fix, but these have got the intrinsic colours on that have actually been turned into kind of pastel shades, so you can see they're still quite nice and bright, but we've actually changed the way they look quite considerably just by using the white colour that comes with the intrinsic colour collection. So actually, really, if you think about it, instead of 11 colours, we've actually got 22. Right. David Stocks, how do you turn off a tenon if you haven't got the fancy equipment? That's a really good question. I'll come on to that in just a minute. Adrian Moore, I don't quite understand your question, but David Stocks, let me see if I can give you a hand with your question. There, right. If you haven't got a set of coal jaws like those up there, or a Longworth chuck or a vacuum chuck, and you want to take the tenon off a bowl, you can use something like this, which is essentially a friction drive. This is made out of a piece of sapele, and it's got a tenon cut on it, and it fits into the chuck. Let me just move that out of the way a little bit. Let's change the angle of the camera too. Oh, right, so this fits into the chuck. Like that. Now, ideally, you need a piece of a thin piece of rubber or something over the front of this, but I haven't got one available. And then what you do is get the bowl and a live centre. Like that. Bring up the live centre. When you turn it in first time round, David, you need to put a little centre mark in there, so you can then bring the tailstock up to hold that in position, and then very slowly, very carefully. Rachel George, thank you so much. That's really kind of you. Thank you. And then with the lathe running very, very slowly, you can use a spindle gouge or something to just ease the tenon away. But you've got to be very careful, because the only thing holding this in position is going to be the friction between the bowl and that friction chuck there. So that's how you would do it if you don't have the posh stuff with the extra jaws and stuff like that. The Caveman, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Oh, my gorgeous wife is watching. Hi, honey. I'll be home soon. These people are keeping me talking. Let me just come back again. David Stocks. All right, I've answered David Stocks. Not sure what Adrian was talking about. I don't quite understand. Gary Jones, you're looking forward to it? Yep, I'm looking forward to it too. Dave Rothwell, do you prefer a tenon or a mortise? I generally prefer to turn with a tenon, Dave Rothwell, because I can turn it off. And let me just do a little comparison for you. Now, I used to be a big supporter of turning recesses like this one, because it enables you to remount it at a later date, to do any refinishing or something like that. But if we can be really honest for a minute, a bowl with a hole in the bottom like that, it doesn't feel particularly nice in the hand, and it doesn't look particularly pretty either. So when you get a little bit better, just try and concentrate on spending the extra few minutes turning off a tenon, in order to create a flat bottom, because then you can decorate it like that. And you've got to admit the difference between just concentrate on the bottoms, one with a hole in and one that's flat. So a flat bottom finished to a bowl is certainly, from a professional perspective, a more desirable outcome than leaving a recess or a tenon in position there. So that's why I prefer, Dave Rothwell, that's why I prefer turning off a tenon than a recess. Mick Hutton, you're very welcome. Stagger the cuts to reduce the scream of the wood bouncing. Yes, that's right, Jim. I think that's what Adrian meant about staggering cuts. I wasn't entirely certain. That is going to be a different demonstration than this one, because it's not really a beginner's technique. It needs really good tool presentation right from the off in order to get it right, because there is a chance the bowl could essentially shatter if you're not careful. Right, let me just scroll back down. Rachel, thank you very much. Brandon Garnwriter, thank you very much indeed to you too. Leisure, you've never used a friction chuck. No. So long as it's big enough, it's absolutely fine, and so long as you've got something between the bowl and the actual friction drive itself that is essentially grippy enough, it'll be fine. And particularly if you turn it slow enough and have enough pressure through the tailstock, everything will be absolutely fine, so long as you've got good tool presentation. Martin Miles, the next demonstration is next Tuesday evening. It's going to be a colouring one where we're going to look at using the intrinsic colour collection as pastel shades rather than the vivid shades that are in the bottles. Dennis Wait, which vacuum chuck would you prefer to use? Dennis, I've only used one vacuum chuck ever, and that is the Holdfast vacuum chuck, so I can't really say anything about any other manufacturer because the Holdfast one was recommended to me, so I got it. Dave James, great broadcast, thank you very much. Can I ask how much someone would have to spend to get an entry-level lathe and tool setup? Dave James, that is a superb question. Right, let me turn one of the cameras round and show you an entry-level lathe. If I turn that round over there, we have a Nova Comet. It has a 12-inch swing, so the 12-inch swing it means it's 6 inches from, is it a 12-inch swing? Sure it is. Yes, it is. Which means it's 6 inches from the centre of the spindle to the bed of the lathe, so you can turn a maximum of 12 inches over the bed, and it's 14 inches between centres. That's a superb little lathe. I've got 3 of them. That's how much I rate them, and I think they're about 450, 460 pounds now, something like that, including a chuck. And a beginner's set of tools like this. There are lots of different tool manufacturers out there, and most of them do entry-level sets. This is the entry-level set from Robert Sorby. 6 tools, and I think it's about £120, something like that. Sorby tools are absolutely excellent, particularly, well, their beginner's set is, or their entry-level set is absolutely fantastic. Crown do a beginner's box set as well, I think, as well as Axminster. And I found out the other day that actually apparently Axminster tools, their own tools, are actually made by Crown. So, you know, that's interesting. Apart from their entry-level kit, but I'm not sure about that. So 120. Well, call that lathe over there the Nova Comet. Call it 600 quid, plus 120 for the tools. That's 720. But then, Dave James, you also need to think about sharpening. If you look over, lift that up over there. In red, you can see a bench grinder. That was about 50 quid from Axminster. I'm assuming Dave Stocks, you're in the UK. Dave James, sorry, that you're in the UK. So 720, 780 for sharpening, including sharpening, and that will be a little bit of PPE as well. A face shield like this one will cost you about £20. Something like that. Well worth it, and they are better than the standard ones that cost about £10 because these have a polycarbonate shell. Dust mask, something like that. A respirator, a half mask, call that 30 quid. So it's a little bog standard budget for you, Dave. Dave James will be about £1,000. I would say to get started would be about £1,000 if you wanted to do it all properly and buy brand new equipment. About £1,000, I'd say. Dave Stocks, could you turn off the foot from a mortise and achieve the same effect? David Stocks, there's no reason why you couldn't turn off the mortise to achieve a similar effect. It'll look a little bit different, but hey, Nothing wrong with that. Clive Gouger, if you leave the bark on a piece that you turned, how would you finish it? Most of the time, Clive, if I'm doing a natural edge piece, which isn't very often, I will just give it an oil finish. Just a little bit of my philosophy on finishing, if you've got a few minutes. The finish that you put onto a piece needs to be considered. Not every piece needs to be bling bling, bright and shiny. Some pieces would be better off with a matte finish or a lustrous finish, something like that. And to my mind at least, a piece that has been cut beautifully like this piece and coloured like that needs to have a bright and shiny finish on it. Because it's been cut, it's perfect. Excuse the inverted commas, it's perfect. The finish needs to be perfect as well. If you've got a natural edge piece, it's not perfect. The edges are all wonky and everything else like that. It doesn't matter how you cut it, the edges are still wonky, implying, in my mind at least, imperfection. So mirror almost the atmosphere of the piece. So if it's imperfect, just keep an imperfect or a matte finish to it, because otherwise the piece aesthetically can contradict itself. I hope that makes sense. So a natural edge piece I would just use oil on, and the majority of burr pieces as well, burr oak, burr elm, ash, things like that, perhaps chestnut, if they are just turned, normally a matte finish looks so much, or an oil finish looks so much better than spraying thousands of coats of lacquer on it, in my opinion. Paul Kavanagh, absolutely right. If your wife asked, mine was a yes, Paul, everybody says that. Lauren, do you use a negative rake scraper in the market for one? What brand would you suggest? Lauren, no, I don't use negative rake scrapers. Never have, and I don't think I ever will. If you've got good tool presentation with a gouge, I can't see why you would need to use one. And if you do need to use a scraper, let me show you my baby scraper here. This is a 1.5 inch Ashley Isles. So we've got a really big edge there. But you see, if I wanted to make this a negative rake scraper, I just hold the handle up like that. You get virtually exactly the same effect if you just hold the handle up. That's all I would do. Just hold the handle up and use it with finger-like pressure or feather-like pressure as well. Right, does anybody else have any questions? You guys are all chatting off about clubs. That's really good to see. You guys, all of you guys who watch regularly, you seem to have a really nice atmosphere going on in the chat that 90% of I miss out on. So you guys seem to be having an absolute ball there most of the time when I'm demonstrating. But yeah, the guys who are talking about clubs and asking and suggesting going to see clubs and maybe picking up some kit from there, they're not wrong. You know, go find it. There is a buoyant second-hand market of wood turning equipment, and a lot of the lathes, particularly the really, really good ones, they hold their value on the second-hand market. Some of the older lathes, the Myfords, the Axminster trade lathes and stuff like that, and the Jets and the Powermatics, second-hand, they keep their value quite well. Right, I'm going to do 3 more minutes of Q&A. It's 10:30, so I really ought to go home and see Natalia, my wife. Chris Pooley, sorry you're late. I'm just about to sign off, Chris. But thank you for signing in anyway. Sorry you missed it, Chris. Jim, I used a skew as a negative rake scraper. Well, yeah, but it's not strictly speaking a scraper, but it's a versatile tool. But a bowl gouge isn't a spindle gouge, but I turn a lot of spindles with a bowl gouge. Phil Bolter, you've not missed much, Chris. Phil, don't be so rude. I'm still your boss, you know, Phil. Phil Bolter, yeah, she could come and drag me out, but I'll bet you anything you like she'd turn up in a dressing gown. Roy Hussman, thanks from Germany. Vielen Dank, Roy. I know you're only having fun, Jim. I'm having a great time. I love doing these demonstrations for you. Can't wait to do next week's either. The intrinsic pastels. That's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, one more minute, and then I'm going to have to pack up and go home, I think. Make Phil wash all the tins in the shop. Yeah, when he comes back to work, I think I might. But then he's done me plenty of favours, sharing the links and stuff to all of my demonstrations round to his club members. Phil is the vice chairman of the Kennet Valley Woodturners Club in Berkshire, and he's a great friend and a huge advocate of both myself and obviously Hampshire Sheen too. Right, big stretch. Oh. You know, I had a coffee before I came out, so although I'm absolutely knackered, I am wired. Sorry, honey, I'm not tired yet. I'm knackered, but I won't be able to sleep. Right, okay, one more question. Somebody ask me one more question, and then I'm going to go. You're welcome, Stuart. Thank you. Thank you for watching again. Still 309 people watching. That's bonkers. Ed Stone, can you be a lathe rider? Oh, what this? These little patches were actually put together by a friend of mine called Dave Kappa Sandon, and he only had about 6 made, so they're very much a limited edition thing. I'll see if I can find out where he gets it from, but it was kind of like a little private jokey club thing. But they are quite cool. Yeah, look at that. Lathe riders. Lauren Becker, would it be better to bring your tailstock up to the bowl to put equal pressure onto the bowl when mounting it onto the jaws? Lauren, it doesn't really matter about bringing the tailstock up to put pressure onto the jaws, because of the nature of the dovetail. So long as if you just rest it in your hands like that, with your thumb in the middle, you can just press the bowl onto the jaws when you're that way round. Sorry. Imagine I haven't carved the inside of the bowl out. So hold it up and put your thumb in the middle, and then you can just rest the jaws over the top of the bowl. Inside the recess, and then when you open the jaws, because of the nature of the recess, it's going to pull the bowl onto the jaws itself. So there's no need to use the tailstock to get an even pressure, because if the recess has been cut accurately, which it should be, it's actually going to pull the bowl onto it. So there's no need to use the tailstock at that point. You're very welcome, Mike. Thank you. Paul Kavanagh, what happened to the platter you were making that you cut the centre tooth in? I showed that a little while ago, Paul, about 10 minutes ago. Lauren Beckett, I used to be a little bit of a biker a long time ago. Certainly not a proper biker at 16 years old. But just for Paul Kavanagh, there it is. I haven't fixed it yet, Paul. It's still there. Chris Pooley, yeah, I know. You lot just keep me talking. Right, I am going to go home now. I am going to go. It's been a long night. I just want to say thank you very much indeed for joining me. I hope you got a lot of information out of the demonstration, and perhaps even I might have been able to show you some ways that you might be able to improve your technique, or even if you haven't turned your first bowl yet, it's inspired you to get out there and turn it. If you have made a super chat tonight, you are absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for helping support the business and the channel and me doing these demonstrations. And finally, please do stay safe, stay well, and I will see you again next Tuesday. So a week tonight, we'll be looking at turning the intrinsic colours to pastel. So once again, thank you very much indeed for joining me, and I will look forward to seeing you again soon. Many thanks. Bye for now.